Hi, everyone, and welcome. Tonight, we are going to hear on the power of modesty by Mrs. Chanie Wolf. Mrs. Wolf is the assistant principal of the Beis Rivka Seminary and is passionate about all topics related to Yiddishkeit and Jewish women. She is the editor for the Mashiach page of the Neshei Chabad newsletter, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her tonight on the power of modesty. I'd like to take this few moments just to give you a few tips. We're going to have questions directed towards me, and I'll ask them of Mrs. Wolf at set points during the lecture. So I'm Chassie Rifkin, and you can message me in the chat box directly. If you could try not to message the whole group, it distracts everyone's train of thought. Also, we welcome you to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook as mikvah.org, on Instagram at mymikvah, and you can join our broadcast. You're welcome to message me 732-534-2948, or easily you can just click on the link again that's in the chat box and join our broadcast so you know all about what's coming up next. What's coming up next right now is next week we have part 2 with Mrs. Chanie Wolf, and the week after that we have Mikvah Stories to Inspire. 12 women, 6 locations, 1 powerful hour. So keep your calendar marked, 8:30 at mikvah.org, Zoom for the next couple weeks. I'd like to also ask that if anyone is willing and able to keep their camera on, it makes for one more wonderful learning experience for everybody. So without any further ado, it's now 8:30, and we'd like to welcome Mrs. Chanie Wolf.
Okay, hi everyone. Is that working? Hi everyone, and welcome to this very special series, The Power of Modesty. I'm very honored and excited about the opportunity to share this with you, and I want to dedicate this particular series, as I always do when I teach this topic, Le'iloi Nishmas Rav Chassid Yitzchak ben Rav Chassid Rav Eliezer Tzvi Zev Zirkind Olav Shalom. The reason for that, I just want to give a little bit a brief background about how this series came to be. Several years ago, in Beis Rivka, I believe it was also in the high school, but I'm in the seminary. We had the schos that Rabbi Zirkind, who was also working, a Rebbe in Crown Heights and also working in Beis Rivka, came in and gave a shir about Tznius. And I have to say for myself that it was the first time that like all these different ideas that had seemed to be kind of all over the place until then, just fell into place and just started to make so much sense. It was like, click, you know, things just, there was a seder and there was logic to it, and I really felt like I finally started to have a grasp on the topic. So after that share by Rabbi Zirkind, I took this concept that he had shared, I wrote it up with some extra details. He approved it. Unfortunately, a short time later, Rabbi Zirkind passed away. So Le'iloi Nishmasai, Mrs. Mrazov and myself have really been teaching this topic. It's all in his chus, the clarity that I hope you will gain as much as I have in learning this from him and teaching it further. So there is a handout. If you saw it before, it's just there to help you take notes and follow along. If you didn't, I think Chassie is going to post the link to that as well, and you're welcome. You can not take notes, you can do whatever you want, but it might be helpful to follow with it to help kind of keep the, great, it's in the chat. Thank you, and you can download it, you can get it later, you can not get it, but it's there to help you follow along. I'm gonna start with this, 1 second. And here we go. All right, do you see that? Are we good? It's showing my PowerPoint? Okay. Okay, so the power of modesty. The focus of this shir is really going to be what we call tznius is actually a mishmash of 5 different things. Now, why do I say that? have ever been confused about people throw around like, tznius, and it is tznius, and it's not tznius, but it's also, it's a look, and there's halacha, and there's shkafa, and if there's chus hagoyim, there's also the concept of something else. And I think there's an issue my mother said, and my teacher said, and I once heard, and they say, and right, and it's kind of like one big mishkababel of all the things that people say about tznius, and it has to do with tznius, it has to do with clothing, and I'm not really sure why, and is it halacha, and is it hashkafa, and are we mixing everything together, and who made up all these rules anyway, right? Some sort of sentiment like that. And there are many reasons for that confusion. But one of the big reasons is that what we talk about in terms of practical halachos related to women's dress are a composite of 5 concepts in Yiddishkeit. They all have somewhat to do with tznius, but they aren't tznius per se. And a way that we might, the way we might understand this is, kind of think of it this way. Think of Shabbos. Picture a young child. Let's say, it's in my home. You'd have like a 3-year-old, and they're reaching out to pick up a pen they found lying somewhere in a corner on Shabbos. And you say, Shabbos, Shabbos, or whatever. And the child says, but it doesn't make noise. Right? Ever encountered that with a child? It doesn't make noise. And it takes time to help a child understand Shabbos does not equal muktzah, does not equal noise. Muktzah is not the name for the things you cannot do on Shabbos. It's one specific category of things that you shouldn't do called move something in certain categories, which do malacha, which don't do malacha, certain things you can't move on Shabbos. The things you cannot do on Shabbos are actually called milacha, not muktzah. There are many kinds of milacha, and most of them have nothing to do with noise. So as we get older, I know we started it in 6th grade, and then we did it later on again. You get older and you start learning there are 39 malachas, and we learn all about Shabbos, and it's complex, and Sfarim are full of it, and you realize there are various categories. One has nothing really to do with the other than they all fall under the general umbrella of Zachar Siyam B'Shabbos L'Kadshai and Zachar and Shomer. And Leisasakal Malacha and extensions of that. And there's the of Malacha, and there's the Tilda, and there's the Shavus, and the Shavus to Shavus, and the extra things, and the Rabbanan, etc. And everything together forms what we know as the Halachos of Shabbos, right? The same thing, of course, applies to kashrus as well. If you're, many people think I can go into a non-kosher restaurant, I can order a salad. Nothing's wrong with salad. It's not meat. It's not milk. I don't have to worry about basar b'chalav. I don't have to worry about shchita. I don't have to worry about, treifa animals or whatever. But you do, because there's something called bugs, and bugs are also not kosher, and they could be, etc. So kosher is also a big umbrella. When we talk about kosher food, we're talking about various mitzvahs. There's the concept of animals that are tahar or not tahar. There's the concept of shchita, of an animal that even that is tahar, was it shechted properly? There's the concept of basar b'chalav. It could be kosher, but it can't be together. There's chalav Yisrael, pas Yisrael, etc. All of them are separate issues. What they have in common is they have to do with food. So by the same token, we have, lots of different things brought down in Torah, in halacha. We call them tznius, but they're old tznius the way everything is kosher. It's like a very big umbrella term, but there are separate issues, separate isurim, separate mitzvahs, separate concepts, and they kind of come together to form what we know as the Yiddish Aveg, the way a Yiddish man or woman, in this case we're talking specifically about the life of women, as it expresses itself there. So based on that, really the key here, and that is in Halachos of Rabbi Zirkind, that we understand that what we're going to call tznius, we're going to divide into 5 issues. Just like we had, different concept of Shabbos, different concepts of kashrus, 5 concepts in Yiddishkeit that together form what we know, what we think of as tznius. So without further ado, I want to start with number 1. We're going to aim for this time, Mirz Hashem, to go through 1 and 2. That's a little bit ambitious. I hope to cover 2, and we'll do the rest next time, Mirz Hashem. There's a lot, and as Chanie said, if you have a question, message it to her. We'll stop at certain points. I hope to address all the questions at some point, Be'ezus Hashem, over the course of the series. Number one, surprisingly enough, is actually called Tznius. But Tznius, as what Halacha calls Tznius, is not what you might think it is. What is Tznius in Halacha? So if you open up a Shulchan Aruch and you look for Hilchos Tznius, what do you expect to find? Everyone would expect to find a list. Cover your elbows, cover your knees, cover this, cover that. Those are the Halachos of Tznius, right? Wrong. Hilchos Tznius actually is about nothing to do with the exact details of women's dress, and it is not about women per se. Actually, if you find Hilchos Tznius and Shulchan Aruch, it is actually about behavior in private in a marriage. So that throws us a little bit for a loop, and we're wondering what is going on here. So let's start from the beginning. What is Tznius, and why is it such a big deal? So Tznius actually, as defined in Torah, as defined in Halacha, number one is for men and women alike, applies always, everywhere, to everyone. Tznius is a way of life that can best be described as a parallel of Yira and Shamayim. So I want to step back and talk about Yira and Shamayim, and then we'll bring it together and understand what does Tznius have to do with Yira and Shamayim. The foundation of Yiddishkeit is, as we find in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Samid. This is, and it's illuminating that it is literally the first se'if of the first siman. It's like you open up Shulchan Aruch, and this is the beginning of being a Yid. Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Samid. I place the Eibishter before me at all times. I recognize, I remember that Hashem stands above me. We all grew up on the famous story of the someone's watching, right? With this guy who's traveling, and he sees some delicious fruit hanging off a tree nearby, and he's so hungry, and he says, watch, let me know if someone's watching. If the owner comes, let me know if someone's watching, I'll run off. And he's about to pull off the fruit, and his wagon driver screams, someone's watching, and he hastily runs down and runs back to the wagon. They wait a little bit longer. He doesn't see anyone. He tries again. Again, he screams, someone's watching. And in a panic, he runs down. They zoom away before anyone could catch them. After he catches his breath, a couple miles later, he says, who was it? Who was watching? And he says, Hashem was watching. Hashem is always watching. And this is really the foundation of Yiddishkeit. Always, as the Shulchan Aruch says, when one recognizes that Hashem is everywhere, even if I'm going to hide, no matter where I am, Hashem sees me at all times. Hashem is always there. That arouses a sense of yira, a sense of awe. I am in the presence of the Eibishter. My whole life has to be, accordingly. The story is told about the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab lived, as most Yidden did, in Russia, in a small apartment. Picture this little apartment, and as Mazel would have it, Bashkacha Pratis, underneath the Rebbe Rashab lived a goy, and not stam a goy. It was a goy who hated the Yidden with a passion, a serious anti-Semite. And he was not happy, let's put it, to put it mildly, he was not happy about the throngs of Hasidim who were always appearing in the upstairs neighborhood at the Rebbe's apartment. And he always looked for opportunities to make trouble. So it transpires, it is Erev Pesach. And the Rebbe Rashab is kashering the kalim for Pesach, and he's doing Hag'olah. Now, those are, who are fortunate in today's society, in the Western world, who are fortunate to have Pesach kalim, it's a Baruch Hashem, a luxury. In the olden days, people didn't have the luxury. Even the Rebbe was kashering the regular kalim, so he was kashering the samovar, the hot water urn. Now, you could imagine to kasher a hot water urn, how much hot water you need to pour to have it kashered, right? So, Segist, Vasser, hot water is pouring all over in the apartment, and Rebbe Sternasara If everyone could please make sure to keep themselves on mute, that would be helpful. Thank you. The Reb Sister Nasara sees the incredible amount of hot what's about to happen, and am I muted also? Do you hear me? I'm good? Okay. So reflexively, Reb Sister Nasara got nervous that, any moment the neighbor's going to come up screaming and who knows what he's going to do. And she tells the Rebbe, maybe we don't have to pour that much water. Like, can we be a little careful? I'm afraid of the downstairs neighbor. Says the Rebbe Rashab to his Rebbetzin, von dem Untersten hast du Meira. From the one below, from the one downstairs, you're afraid. Und von dem Obersten hast du nicht Meira. From the one above, you're not afraid. Now, when we say the word fear, I think there's like a visceral reaction sometimes we have as Lubavitchers, like, oh, we don't talk about fear in Lubavitch, right? So, of course, we don't mean fear like fear of punishment, but what really is this Yira we're talking about? What is the Rebbe Rashab referring to? What is von dem Obersten hast du nicht Meira? What is this Meira that we are meant to have for the Eibishter? And really, how do we define Yira Shamayim? So, let's get back to our slide here. 1 second. Okay. So, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, Perek Amalek, and it's an incredible thing to recognize that this is, out of the entire Chassidus, out of everything that we are taught in all of the Sichos and Maimarim, throughout the entire Tanya, all of Chassidus, Sigist, there's so much of it. What is the one piece that the Rebbe recommends, and not just recommends, really, really, begs us as Chassidim to learn every single day, not sometimes, not once a year in the Chitas, but day in, day out before davening, ask the Chassidim, meditate. It's not extra words to say, meditate on this specific paragraph in Chassidus. Is this beginning of Perek Mem Aleph, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, very briefly. Says the Alter Rebbe, Reishis ha'avodah v'ikra v'sharsha, the foundation, the whole yesod, the whole basis of avodas Hashem is Yiras Shamayim, even mitzvahs aseh. Meaning, we know that all the mitzvahs aseh are an extension of the first dibra, the first mitzvah, Nochi Hashem Elokecha, the positive. And all the mitzvahs lois aseh are an extension of lo yeh lecha, not to have other that we worship besides the Eibishter, chas v'shalom. Everything's an extension of that. And essentially that means that all mitzvahs aseh are really an extension of the positive, of aseh tov, do for Hashem, love Hashem, do for Him. And all the mitzvahs lois aseh are an extension of don't chas v'shalom move away from Hashem's oneness by separating yourself through doing something He doesn't want. Nevertheless, says the Alter Rebbe, even in mitzvahs aseh, even in the positive mitzvahs, the foundation, the reason we do them needs to be ultimately, at least on a basic level, a sense of Yira. What is that Yira? A basic recognition, a sense inside, deep inside that says, Hashem is Melech Malchei Mlochim. Hashem is everything. The king of the world. At all times, Hashem is watching. How can I say no? Or how can I do what it is that Hashem doesn't want? Why is Yira the foundation? Isn't it so much nicer to talk about Ahava? And it should all be about positive feelings. It should all be about, I feel connected. I want to feel connected. I do it out of love for Hashem. Why is the Alter Rebbe tell us, is Yira the foundation of Yiddishkeit? Why even the mitzvah say does it have to boil down to Shaloi limrei b'melech malchei lachem chas v'shalom, that I should go against the Eibishter says, as the Alter Rebbe continues there, V'hine Hashem nitzav olav, and the Rebbe takes those words from Perek Mem Aleph takes the words as a yisoid for all Yiddim, specifically Yiddish children. We look about V'hine Hashem Nitzavol, that this is one of the 4 quotes from Chassidus and one of the 12 quotes throughout Torah, 3 of Torah Shebechsav, 3 Torah Shebal Peh, 4 Torah Shebechsav, 4 Torah Shebal Peh, 4 Chassidus. One of these 4 is this particular quote that the Rebbe wants every child to know by heart, V'hine Hashem Nitzavol, there at the bottom. That if I recognize that I, at all times, what is Yira Shamayim? To recognize that I stand before Hashem, Hashem stands above me. Hashem can see everything I'm doing. He knows deep inside how I feel, how hard I'm trying, how sincere, what Yiddishkeit means to me. And recognizing that Hashem stands above me at all times, I'm in Hashem's presence, a person will come automatically to Yira, to a sense of awe that I recognize that I'm standing before the king. Why Yira? So the Rebbe explains that Ahava is wonderful. We all know how important Ahava is, and that's key always. Chassidus explains that you can compare the concept of Kabbalah's oil and Ahava to a human being, where Yira and Kabbalah's oil, we'll put them together for a moment, it's the same concept, that Yira and Kabbalah's oil on a basic level are the skeleton. A human being can't stand without the structure of the skeleton. It's what keeps them a form of a human being. But obviously, not to be graphic, but a skeleton in and of itself is not alive, right? There's nothing without the basic structure, but without flesh and bones and the lifeblood, it's not alive. So the life, the chayis, the energy, the passion is the ahava that we have towards everything in Yiddishkeit, the ahava to the Eibishter. We want to make him happy. We want to make a dira b'tachtain, and we're excited. We run to do a mitzvah. But the focus of our conversation here now is, even with that there, we need to ensure that there is a basic level running. We're talking about everything throughout our Avodas Hashem, a basic sense at all times that there's a foundation that even if I'm not excited, even if it's not particularly motivating, even if it's not especially inspiring, Hineni, I'm here. I think of as a mother, Baruch Hashem, imagine it's the middle of the night, it's 3:00 in the morning, I haven't slept much yet, and any mother has ringing in her head, this noise that gets ingrained there, and the noise, the crying starts right when you're literally out, and you're really not thrilled. Most mothers, if you are, please don't make me feel like a bad mother. But I don't think most mothers at 3:00 in the morning go yes, an opportunity to bond with my baby. This is so incredibly awesome. I'm so inspired for the opportunity to have bonding one-on-one time. It's more like a reflexive, my baby needs me. My baby just needs me. It's just that simple. There aren't words to it. It's this basic sense that obviously I'm the child's mother. The child needs something. I'm there. It doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter what I think. It just is, because it's not possible otherwise. It just can't be otherwise. I'm needed. And that's commitment. In parenting, our children need our love so badly. They really do. They need our feelings. They need to know we love them. We care about them. We delight in them. We enjoy them. We're so happy they're in our family. We get a kick out of them. They need to know that. It's important. But underneath that, there is something way more important, and that is the security of knowing my parents are there for me. Like me, nothing to do with most important is they're there. When I need them, they're going to be there. That's the commitment. And when the commitment is there, the love comes. For example, let's say there's a child that a parent is not especially particularly connecting with. There's a clash of personalities or whatever. And it's not necessarily such a natural fit for this exciting connection. The parent who's committed and recognizes this is my child. I am the child's parent. I don't have another parent. There's only me. There's only us. If the parent is committed, they will work on the relationship. That commitment will bring to love. They're going to say, you know what, let's make this happen. I'm going to commit to once a week taking out the child and doing a fun activity with them. I'm going to commit to thinking about the child's qualities. I'm going to commit to doing this or that fun game with them or whatever it is that's going to help us connect, etc. Let's say you talk about a marriage, okay? In a marriage, the same thing. So everyone knows how important positive feelings are in a marriage. Love, right? It's all about love. We all want in a relationship that we currently are in and those in the future, that the marriage should be full of love. And we bench a couple, that it should be that kind of loving connection. But what is the foundation of the relationship in the marriage? The foundation is not love. Imagine a husband tells his wife, you know, you're so wonderful and you're so cute that like for sure I'm just going to take care of you. How reassured is a wife going to feel? And that's not very reassuring. That's doesn't give much security. And what about when I'm in a bad mood? What about when I'm hormonal? What about, it's just one of those days? What about if there's something I need that's particularly inconvenient, then you won't take care of me because it's not so fun? Like, it's very nice to be thought of as cute and fun and to be liked and beautiful and whatever the case might be. But ultimately, the marriage rests on a commitment. The ksuba is not a statement of love. The ksuba is a statement of commitment. I'm yours. You're mine. I am there to take care of you. I'm there to do whatever you need. And the beauty of it is part of the commitment that that one makes to their spouse is I commit to a relationship of love. Let's say I'm going to wake up one day and not particularly think you're the most awesome human being on the planet, as I did the other time. I'm going to be upset for some reason, and I'm going to lose some of the excitement. Then what? Then I am committed because I stood under the chuppah and there was that harayat mekudeshesli, there was that commitment. I am committed to working on the relationship. Something is going not so well, the love is waning. We'll work on it. We'll do whatever it takes. We'll talk it out. We'll talk it amongst ourselves. We'll talk to someone else if we need to. We'll do whatever, activities it means to work on the relationship, etc. In other words, when there is love, that doesn't guarantee there will be commitment. But when there is commitment, there will be love. And this is the yesod of Yiddishkeit and why the Shulchan Aruch begins with Shivisi Hashem L'negdi Samid, and why the Alter Rebbe puts Perek Mem Aleph, that everything is about Yira. When we're able to access that basic sense of I belong to the Eibishter, I committed, I stood at Har Sinai and I told Hashem, Naaseh v'nishma. I'm not feeling inspired, I'll work on being inspired. I will learn chassidus. I will work on, that's also a mitzvah. V'haftas Hashem leikecha. It's a mitzvah. I'm committed to having Avos Hashem. Avos Yisrael, I'm committed to having Avos Yisrael. All that will follow. But Yira has to be at the core. And therefore, because Yira is such a big deal, because Yira Shamayim is so critical to Yiddishkeit, there is a lot in Halacha that focuses on helping us access this Yira, build on this Yira, and ensure that it always remains part of our Avodas Hashem and something that we can feel. I think I'm going to brief over this because we're running a little bit late. Okay, we'll get back to this soon. So one of the most powerful examples of a mitzvah that we are given that allows us to access and build on our Yiras Shamayim is the Mitzvah of Tznius. And this is the number one Tznius that we're talking about, which we'll define soon in Halacha. But first and foremost, it is something that we should see as a lifestyle that has been given to us to help us both express our Yira Shamayim and foster Yira Shamayim where it's lacking. There are many sources that bring us the connection between Yira Shamayim and Tznius. I'm going to show you a few. One is, it's fascinating when you look at the pasuk that says, Maisha Rabbeinu tells the Yidden in Devarim, what does Hashem ask of you? What does he want already? Only, oops, okay, having internet issues, hope you hear me. What does Hashem ask of you? Kim liyira, just have Yira Shamayim, right? And without getting into all the, as Gemara asks, no big deal, just have Yira Shamayim, just be committed to Hashem and do whatever he wants, oh, no big deal at all. But without getting into all the explanations of that. Maisha Rabbeinu takes all of Yiddishkeit and boils it down, as we just described, to one thing. All of Yiddishkeit boils down to being committed, having Yira Shamayim. We find a very similar expression brought in by Micha, the Navi Micha. He says, if you want to know how to repay Hashem, how do you know what you can do for Hashem? What does Hashem want from you? Note a similar lashon to what Maisha Rabbeinu said. He asks, what does Hashem ask of you? Micha says, what does Hashem demand of you? And he lists three things. What Maisha Rabbeinu said in one, Micha says in three. Ases mishpat, do mishpat, avas chesed, do chesed, love chesed, vatznei leches melekecha. I'm not going to get into the others, but very briefly, the Alter Rebbe in Perek Lamed Beis of Tanya explains why avas Yisrael, which you can connect to ases mishpat, avas chesed, why that's the foundation of Yiddishkeit. And they're all really connected to the same core. I'm not going there right now. But one of the three pillars that Micha defines as this is all of Yiddishkeit is Hatznei Aleches. Certainly, he's not making up a new Yiddishkeit. It's not something else. Clearly, Hatznei Aleches is another way of saying Yiras Shamayim. And as the Sefer Hasidim writes, Habusha v'ha'emuna nitzmodos. Busha is shame, a certain basic, innate, healthy sense of shame. Not like, I'm embarrassed in my body. A healthy sense of shame, a healthy sense of busha, tznius, ve'emuna, and belief in the Eibishter, which will connect with Yira Shamayim, and awareness of Hashem's presence, nitzmodos, they're a pair. They walk together. They're a couple. Kshetistale ka'achas, tistale chaverta. When one goes, the other goes. And that's both, of course, in the negative, but also in the positive. Why? So before I get into the halachos of that, what is the connection between Yira Shamayim and Tznius? There's a story, Rebbe Ashkenazi from Eretz Yisrael once came to Yehudis by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe asked her, tell me, how is the Yira Shamayim of the women in the Kfar? Now at the time, she was, I believe, a young mother, maybe two children, like really a young mother who had just become the Rebbetzin, really, was not, felt maybe intimidated. And the Rebbe is asking her to comment on the Yiras Shamayim of the women in Kfar Chabad. You can imagine how she felt. It was very, very uncomfortable. Like she looked at the Rebbe like, what am I supposed to say? And the Rebbe says, the Eben HaBoichin of Yiras Shamayim, the litmus test is Tznius V'Tara. The litmus test of Yiras Shamayim is Tznius. Why is that? For many reasons, but in very short, and I want to get practical now. Tznius entails a full-time awareness. It's a lifestyle. It's not an action I can check off at a particular time. It's not just how I got dressed at a certain moment, and then I'm done. It's not something you could put in the checkbox of this is what it entails, this is the time, this is the moment, I'm done. Because as we said before, it's everywhere, it's all the time. It requires an awareness of Hashem's presence. In other words, what is this tznius we're talking about? This tznius is a sensitivity. It's an edelkeit, it's a refinement, it's a dignity where a yid recognizes, I stand before Hashem. What's appropriate? I am in the king's presence. How do I talk? How do I walk? How do I look? What do I do? How do I sit? Whatever, everything. What do I share? If a yid is, as we talk about Yira Shamayim, always thinking Hashem is watching, Hashem is watching, V'hine Hashem Nitzav Olav, automatically that means a certain way of being. If I'm going to be in front of the king, if I'm going to be in front of whatever, official, very important, dignified audience, I'm going to be careful at all times. I'm going to be a little bit restrained. I'm not just going to let loose and do whatever I want, right? I'm going to think very carefully, how do I come across? Am I being respectful? If I go to a chasana, right? And maybe we have many chasanas to go to without any concerns. I'm going to think, what is the right way to dress? And of course, if I'm closer and I'm the sister or, someone very close, I'm going to dress in a way that reflects, that makes it very clear, this person is very, very close to me. I'm expressing that in the way I'm dressed. Oh, I'm just the babysitter who came to pick up a child. I might not particularly, I might look very different. The way we comport ourselves at all times, the way we speak is going to reflect how seriously do I take, how much respect do I have for those I'm talking to or those I'm with or those who are watching me, etc. Which brings us to the Shulchan Aruch. The practical application of the Mitzvah of Tznius is as follows. V'hatzneya leches melekecha, says the Shulchan Aruch further, a little bit further in the beginning in Siman Gimel, about getting dressed. What does the Mitzvah of hatzneya leches melekecha practically mean? That because of this mitzvah, a person needs to at all times be aware and conscious and tzniistic b'chol archaisav in all ways. And this is an incredible thing. Halachically, that which people say, like, oh, it's the hashkafa, it's the look, it's the sense, it's the style, it's the sensitivity. This sensitivity actually required in halacha. In Shulchan Aruch, a yid is required at all times to be edel, to be refined, to be dignified in all ways. Again, men and women, at all times, in the way we talk, in public, in private. And specifically, the Shulchan Aruch here points out private behavior. What is the ultimate expression of tznius as Yira Shamayim? That when a person is getting dressed or undressed, we should be careful. One should be careful not to expose one's body, except under the covers, only get dressed and undressed under the covers, except if we're in the bathroom, and even there in the bathhouse, in the bathroom, even there, one should dress and undress as little as possible to be uncovered. What does this have to do with Yira Shamayim? A person shouldn't say, I'm in the dark. The door is locked. No one's here. Why? Because what kind of thought process is that? Hashem is here. Hashem is here everywhere. Dark is like light. It makes no difference. And here I want to focus on this line. Tznius and boishes, a sense of edelkeit, a sense of tznius, a sense of being careful about how I present myself. Incredibly powerful words. Automatically, practically, tznius, living a lifestyle of tznius, being conscious, how am I speaking? How do I look? How am I getting dressed or undressed? Forces one into a state of mind where I'm conscious of Hashem's presence. It makes me bitteldik. Why am I being so careful to get dressed under the covers? No one's here. I am reinforcing in a very tangible way a feeling of Yira Shamayim. A beautiful story is told about a chassid named Rabbi Yerachmiel. Rabbi Yerachmiel was sent by the Rebbe Rashab in the very, very painful time after the Gzera of the Cantonists. I believe that was already resolved when unfortunately they were picking up little children off the street, right? Sending them to be soldiers 25 years after all those brutal years without a family, without Yiddishkeit, suffering terribly, Mesiras Nefesh. They had been taken away at 8, 9 years old. They didn't know anything. Many of these Cantonists, they graduated and they had to settle somewhere. The government gave them a plot of land. So they settled together, broken people, emotionally crippled, unfortunately. And they lived together. The Rebbe Rashab sent Rabbi Yerachmiel to be a Rav to this group of Cantonists in a particular city, I believe it was called Petroskovsk, something like that, and to help them, to give them some Yiddishkeit. So he goes there, he tries, he does this, he does that, he says some shiurim, some this, shofar, whatever, he's trying to do whatever he can. Comes the Yomim Noraim, and he feels this is my project, Rosh Hashanah is coming, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we got to do something. He gets machzer, and he sets up a whole situation. To make a long story short, he's putting all his koiches into this Rosh Hashanah, and he walks in, and the people there, they're like, what do they know from davening? They meant well, really. They Maisha nefesh not to shmadzach. They really, but they couldn't follow. They didn't know what was going on. They were very bored. They're murmuring, they're mumbling, they're doing this, they're doing that. He was feeling so disheartened. It was like everything. The whole thing was just, it was not a situation. Suddenly, towards the end, a big burly, bully, his name was Feigl. He was like the boss in the town. He bangs on the table, says, Chevre, this is not a matzav. This doesn't work, not a situation. I hereby command everybody, you show up tomorrow in your army uniforms. And it was like, yes, boss, mafia boss kind of situation. Everyone listened. They went home. The next day they came back, perfectly polished, buttons, everything, ironed outfits as if they're standing in front of the Tsar. And again, he bangs before it's time for Tekiyas Shofar. Feigl bangs on the table and screams out to everybody. My friends, imagine we're in the army and the Tsar is coming for an inspection. And you're standing in front of the Tsar and he's looking you up and down, and imagine how you're shaking inside. We are now standing in front of the King of Kings, and it's the holiest day of the year. And we're crowning God as the king right now. And it's that serious, and everyone's going to listen to shofar with respect. And you could hear a pin drop. And they're standing there like this, and they blow shofar, and they're davening the rest of it. And it was like, le'elo, it was unbelievable. And from then on, every year, the minhag in Petrovsk was that everyone showed up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening in their army uniforms. And I love this story because it illustrates what dress does to a person. As, they put on the uniform and they were able to access what they hear Rosh Hashanah, Hashem, it wasn't talking to them. And it tangibly, automatically, their body reacted. It was like the sense of oh, now you act dignified. It turned them into different people. And this is the effect that clothing has on us, that Tznius has on us, that the Shulchan Aruch is talking about. Living in a Tzniustic way helps us get in touch with that sense of Yira Shamayim, which is why it's such a big deal, which is why there's such an emphasis on it, which is why it's a reflection of Yira Shamayim. If I want to recognize Hashem's presence, I put myself in that kind of space. Practically, and then I want to move on, the practical application of this is that really a Yid is required to get in touch with their basic sensitivity at all times, man or woman, about the way we dress, the way we speak, the way we're acting, what we're sharing, how fancy of a simcha we're making and flaunting it, how much we're telling everyone about ourselves, boasting, etc., everything. To be conscious of what is refined, what is dignified, what is edel, what reflects humility, and what brings about humility and Yira Shamayim. And that's something that can't be defined in rules from anyone else. It's really Hashem trusts us to have that innate sensitivity. And this sensitivity is natural to Yidden. And it's important that we recognize that we really have it in ourselves. We live in a world where sensitivity it's so undermined. But the Gemara tells us that there are 3 simanim that define a Yid. The Rebbe talks about getting a mashpia. The Rebbe says that the one criteria for assigning a mashpia is recognizing in them, you can see in them the 3 midas that define a Yid. They're good enough to be your mashpia. And they are rachnas, baishanas, chasadim. Baishanas means, of course, this, tznius, edelkeit, refinement, yiras shamayim. How does the Gemara prove? How do we know that baishanim is one of the simanim? Note the constant interchange of yira and baishanas, tznius, yira, busha. One of the simanim of a Yid that defines us is refinement. We're not all over the place. We recognize I'm in Hashem's presence. I'm humble. And as the Sefer Chinuch says, when we feel like we've lost the sensitivity or we're not sure, it's like people say there's a sensitivity, but I don't feel it. I don't get what's wrong with it. I don't think there's anything, what's the big deal? I don't get why, I have to get dressed under the covers. I don't get why this is not edel. I don't understand why this or that suggestion is, I don't have that sensitivity. Says the Sefer Chinuch, as we just shared the story of Feigl, that with the actions, with choosing the actions of tznius, the sensitivity comes along. So it's like, if I naturally have the sensitivity, that's an incredible thing. And I should recognize that for what it is, an expression of Yira Shamayim. But I shouldn't get disheartened if I feel like I don't get it. I just don't get it. This Rebbitzin is saying that, and that one's saying the other. And my teacher said, and my mother said, and my grandmother said, and whoever said that this or that is not appropriate. I just don't get it. I don't see what's wrong with it. That's okay. It comes with actions. In fact, the Frierdiker Rebbe tells an incredible story about when he was arrested by, of course, Yidden, we make our own problems the worst, always. But he was arrested by Yidden, right? The Yidden of the Efseksia, of the Jewish section of the communist government. And they interrogated, they really poured all their venom against Yiddishkeit on the Frierdiker Rebbe and suffered tremendously from them. And at one point, they taunted the Frierdiker Rebbe and they said, tell us, do you keep Yiddishkeit, do you keep Torah mitzvahs out of conviction? Like, are you sure it's true, or is it blind faith? And they expected that, of course, the Frierdiker Rebbe is going to say, blind faith. I mean, how could you be sure? You can't be sure of the presence, of the existence of Hashem. How can you be sure it's true? He'll say that, and they'll make fun that it's so unsophisticated, haha. And the Frierdiker Rebbe surprised them. He said, "What must say is conviction. Of course, I'm sure about it. I'm absolutely confident." And thrown, sort of taken aback and thrown off, they stumbled. Yeah, really? Prove it. You're so sure? You're confident that Yiddishkeit is true. It's a conviction. What's the proof? The Frierdiker Rebbe told them something incredible. He says, "I'm happy to give you proof on one condition. First, you come live. I don't remember if he said a week or 2 weeks, as from a Yidden. You come to a Yiddish community. You dress like Yidden, you live like Yidden, you keep Shabbos, you keep everything, you keep all the mitzvahs." He gave him a week or two, I'm sorry that I forgot which one, a specific period of time. And after that, I'll be able to prove it to you. And it's an amazing thing. Once we're in it, we feel it. And we see this all the time, with Mitzvahim, etc. So, not to be disheartened if this sensitivity that we're talking about at Tznius, just have this feeling of like, I'm in Hashem's presence. Am I looking dignified? Am I speaking dignified? Is this dignified? Is this respectful of Hashem's presence if I'm not totally in tune? If I can, and we'll talk about guidelines going further, Mitzvah Hashem, if I can take the specific halachas that are brought down, the things that I'm told are tzniistic, and just implement them practically for a period of time, Torah tells us you'll get the sensitivity. You'll start feeling it. It will start becoming not a cause, but it will come in effect. It will actually start being an expression of your own innate Yira Shamayim. And I want to just add one more thought before I move to number 2. And that is that not only as Yidden is this edelkeit, this busha, this dignity natural, but as women even more so. Tell the famous story is brought, I believe, in the Medrash about Malkas Sheva, Queen of Sheva, that she came to test Shlomo HaMelech's wisdom. So one time she did a trick. She took a bunch of many children, boys and girls, had their hair all cut really super short, all wore the same robes, and she mixed them up and said, King Shlomo, let's see if you can figure out who are the boys, who are the girls. There was like no way to tell. Shlomo HaMelech commanded that they should put out nuts and some other treats all over the floor, and told the children, go ahead, collect as much as you can. I'm going to stop for questions in a moment. And within moments, you could see that some of the children picked up the hem of their robes, collected as many nuts as they could into the hem, and were like, holding on to the hem of their robes like a bag, like a basket. And others bent down from their knees and just held whatever they could in their hands. Shlomo HaMelech instantly said, everyone who picked up their robes, they're boys. The girls are not going to do that. And of course, he was right. So what I want to conclude with before we get to number 2, and I'm going to stop for some questions now, is the first thing, and again, if you have questions, please send them to Chassie, and Chassie will ask some questions. Number 1, tznius in and of itself before we get to other aspects that we connect to it, the Mitzvah of Tznius is a mitzvah to get in touch with our inner core that is cognizant, that is that recognizes that we are in Hashem's presence, and just to live naturally out of that sensitivity, whatever that looks like. And Hashem trusts that we have that and that we will constantly work to foster it. Kasi. You're on mute.
Okay, do you hear me now? Yes. Okay.
I hear you. Yeah.
Okay. The first question is, busha. Here it sounds like a good thing, but in benching we say shaloi nevesh. So what's the line between good busha and not good busha according to the Torah?
Great question. I would just say briefly that, just think about the concept of Har Sinai, that Hashem didn't give the Torah on the tall mountain, but he also didn't give the Torah in a valley. A yid has to have, we don't want to be, we don't want to have an inferiority complex. We don't want to be embarrassed of who we are. We want to be proud of who we are. We want to have a healthy confidence. And that's what we're talking about, Shalei Nevash. We don't want to be embarrassed from the nations. We don't want to be embarrassed by what other people say. And I skip back because we were running out of time. But, a huge part of your Shamayim is if I have busha before Hashem, you know what, I'm actually going to go back there because that really answers that question. Give me a second here. If I have busha before Hashem, no, I can't go back. Then I will not have busha before others. And that's really the answer. Busha before Hashem allows me to have the confidence that I don't care what other people say. So we don't want to be embarrassed about what other people say. We want to only be uncomfortable at what does Hashem think.
Okay, thank you. Also, well, with Yira is the foundation, then does Ahava play a role in Tznius? And if so, what does that look like? Like in Halachos, it says that the sin of sinas chinam is found primarily amongst the frum. Yira Shamayim exists without humility. Is humility in Yira Shamayim interchangeable? I'm not sure if this is all part of one question, that's all from one person, or separate questions. I'm going to say it all and you'll address it. I'd love to have a better understanding of humility. Is there such a thing as being too humble, too tsunua, or too much Yira?
Right. So thank you. So again, the humility, yes, there is something that's too much humility. That's what we call the valley, trying to see if I can get back to the beginning part of the, 1 second. I'm going to try to go back to the slide that I missed and show you that. Here we go. Okay. So 1 second. The basic idea is that no, we're not looking to be too humble in the sense that we're not confident, but we don't want to be arrogant. And that healthy balance is really the sweet spot of a healthy Yiddishkeit and appropriate avodas Hashem that ultimately rests on why am I confident? What is it I'm proud of? Is it my own talents? Am I proud of myself? Do I think that I'm awesome? Or am I thinking, I am a part of the Eibishter. That's what I'm proud of. My pride comes from Hashem. And second, here we go. And I'm proud of the neshama. I am a part of Hashem. My worth, in other words, my worth comes from being a neshama. That's all I have. Hashem decided that I matter because he put me in this world and he continues to put me in this world at every moment. That's what's important about me. And therefore, my value is expressed as my ability to serve Hashem. That, when my dignity, when my pride, when my self-confidence is focused on me as a yid serving Hashem, that's healthy. That is Hashem-centered. My confidence and pride of I'm talented, I'm beautiful, I'm awesome, I'm wonderful, people like me, I'm popular, that's pride that is coming from the Nefesh Bahamis that really, there's no amount of it that's healthy. And so in other words, the basic answer is as so long as it's Hashem-centered, and that's what Yira Shamayim and Tznius helps us do, see ourselves as I define myself as a child of Hashem, then whatever comes from that is going to be positive. And the concept of busha means that I want to be humble enough to recognize that I have nothing without Hashem. But maybe to answer the question better, I'm going to want to look at this here. The Rebbe talks to a woman who is uncomfortable with tznius, and she's afraid, I think in particular this letter is about Sheitel, and she's afraid people are going to make fun of her. So the Rebbe tells her, you know that the beginning of Shulchan Aruch is le'ezbayish b'pnei bnei adam hamaligim olav, that we shouldn't be embarrassed by those who make fun of us in Avodas Hashem. And Hashem is everywhere. So how could it be that you're embarrassed from someone else and you're not embarrassed, from what Hashem thinks? So I hope that answers the question. Meaning we don't want to be embarrassed from other people. We don't want to care about what other people think. We want to simply be in tune with what does Hashem want, what does Hashem think, and that's the healthy busha we're talking about. Is there anything else, Asi, or am I moving on? Okay.
1 second. There was a question over here in the chat. How do you go about this without getting stressed out? When you were talking about always getting dressed, keeping it private. So let's address that.
Okay. I want to stop here actually and share something that I was just about to share in introduction to number 2 anyway. I heard this story in the name of Rabbi Levin from Palo Alto, that when he went out on shluchos, the Rebbe, Rebbe Chadukah, but we know that the instructions from Rebbe Chadukah generally came from the Rebbe, and if not were an expression of the Rebbe's hashkafas on the matter. He called him in, Rebbe Chadukah, and told him, you should know you're going out to California. There are a lot of people you're going to see, you're going to see them as not from, they're going to tell you they're not Shomer Shabbos, etc. There's no such thing as a Yid who's not Shomer Shabbos. Every Yid is a Shomer Shabbos. You should know that it's possible, just all of us, every single one of us, we have a Yetzer Hara. There's the Amalek inside that tries to get us to not act in accordance with who we are. So make sure to remember that you're seeing every Yid as a Shomer Shabbos and help them see themselves that way. Now, I can stop the story there because that's the point, but the story is beautiful that he shares that, he really tried to take that to heart. And one time he met with a Yid who was a Holocaust survivor who ran a jewelry store, and he tells him, I'm not religious, I'm not Shomer Shabbos, I'm not whatever. And he spoke to Rabbi Levin about this concept, every Yid is a Shomer Shabbos. You are a Shabbos Yid. There are things that are hard about it. Okay, so there are things that are hard for all of us. There are times we trip up, we slip up, we make mistakes. It's difficult, but you're a Yid who keeps Shabbos. He spoke to him about it. Anyway, a few weeks later, he came again to Mitzvah on a Friday to put on tefillin with him. And he sees there's another customer there who asked him if he could fix his watch for him. And he tells him, I'm sorry, it's almost Sunday. I can't do it for you. I can't do it for you. Not today. I can't. No, can you do it? No, I can't do it today. The customer left, potential customer, and he turns to Rabbi Levin and he says, since you came a few weeks ago, I took upon myself, I don't do watch repairs on Shabbos. It's almost sundown. I don't do watch repairs on Shabbos. And he told him later on, you gave me back my Yiddishkeit. And I share this story because, first of all, for those of us who are in a position of chinuch, of influencing others, it's important we see it that way, but it's also important we talk to ourselves that way. Every single one of us is a tzniistika person. I am a tzniistika woman. I'm a tzniistika Yiddish woman or girl. It's possible that at times it's challenging. I shouldn't see it as, okay, I can't do this. I don't do this. No, I do this. Right now it's hard. So first of all, the perspective that I'm not trying to be something I'm not. This is who I am. I'm trying to just get in touch with it. I'm trying to be aware. And like everything else, every awareness we want to have, we start small, we take on a specific halacha. I'll be mindful of this. I'll be mindful of that. It's not about fear. It's not about something's going to happen otherwise. It's about seeing it. And perhaps this connects with what you said earlier, asked about Ahava, seeing it as recognizing it's not like, oh no, something's going to happen, but rather with every time that I am conscious, every time I can remember, every choice that I make that is more tzniistic, that helps me express myself in a more refined manner, helps me feel more connected to Hashem. And it's a gift. And so long as I see it as, it's an important, critical part of my Yiddishkeit, I can move that into, without thinking of it the negative, always think of it as every moment I do it as an opportunity to get in touch with that again.
Thank you, Chanie. We have 2 questions about stockings, but I believe you're going to get there.
Yes.
So if those of you who asked, I'm not ignoring you. We will address it. So Chanie, go ahead now to the second.
Okay. All right. So I think we're where we'd like to be. We're hopefully going to, I'm warning you that, this is a long topic, so we're not going to get to the whole number 2. There are going to be a lot of questions we're not going to get answered today. A lot of them are going to get left for tomorrow, for next week in Mirz Hashem. But we're going to try our best, and we will try to get to all the practical things, meaning in number 2, we're getting into the practical halachas of women's dress. And so it's a huge topic. Try to do one thing at a time. So number 2, after we've discussed that Tznius is an edelkeit, it's a sensitivity, it's Yira Shamayim, that brings us to understanding that, like everything in Yiddishkeit, Hashem doesn't just say, Zocher Siyam Shabbos L'Kadshai, make it holy, make it a Shabbos Hayom LaHashem, was my favorite song, Shabbos Hayom LaHashem, right? Geshrein Shabbos. It's a Halachic tug, so Hashem could have just said, it's a holy day, just make it feel holy, do whatever makes you feel connected. He didn't say that. He said it's a holy day. It should feel like a holy day, and he gives us guidelines, right? He gives us very specific guidelines. At least do this, at least do that. Have 2 or 3 su'udas. At each su'uda, at least do this. Make kiddush, right? A bunch of criterion. And then it's up to us to recognize that that's a framework, which means when Torah tells us that we're supposed to have a su'uda, we're supposed to make kiddush, we're supposed to wash for challah, we should have good food, tasty food, etc., divrei Torah, etc. That's the framework. Now, you could say technically, I'm Yotze Zayin, I did it. I came in with my sweatshirt. I washed on a roll. I put some salami inside. It counts as fleish, whatever. We talked about politics. I did my duties halachically. You could say that, but obviously that's not the spirit of, in anything, what Torah was obviously trying to create. But not everything can be legislated, as we said before. You can't legislate tact. You can't give someone the rules of tact. You can't legislate sensitivity. You can't legislate what is a Shabbostic suda supposed to look like. You can only give basic guidelines, and that's number 2. But on the contrary, the opposite. You can't give guidelines and legislate every sensitivity. But you also can't just say, here's a sensitivity, figure it out. Torah gives us rules. It gives us boundaries. At least this. And work off that. So same thing as with Tznius. It's a sensitivity we need to cultivate. But Hashem also gives us specific rules. And these rules are divided into Das Maisha and Das Yehudis. Now, I want to first talk about Halachos of Halacha and understand the definitions here before we can get into any of the details, because they're very important. What is Das Maisha? Das Maisha is anything you see here in Gemara, anything that is derived from Torah. The Meiri explains Das Maisha Namar Mitzvah Aksuvas B'Torah, anything, a mitzvah that is written in the Torah or hinted to in the Torah. As we know, it doesn't say anywhere in Torah Shebachsav about Lamites Malachas. It only says Loi Sasa Kol Malacha. That's all it says. And Chachamim have to explain to us based on Maisha Kibel Torah Misinai Misar Yeshua, right? The whole transmission of Torah. Maisha went up to learn the Torah from Hashem for 40 days on Har Sinai to learn all the details. What does Loi Sasa Kol Malacha mean? And he came down with the rules, passed it on to Yeshua, Liskenim, etc., etc. And every generation, the Chachamim passed it on to the next generation of Chachamim. What are all the details? Eventually, this was written down in the Mishnah, eventually in the Gemara. All of this is stemming from what was told to Maisha at Har Sinai, or the rules given to Maisha at Har Sinai of how to interpret and find, right? I'm not going to go to all the examples, right? But as we know, in every area, Shabbos, Kashrus, everything, Chachamim look at a pasuk and derive through the 13 midas, through the rules given to Maisha Rabbeinu, how do you learn out the halacha? So any halacha that is spelled out, hinted to, in any way derived from Torah is Das Maisha. Das Yehudis is a different category. Das Yehudis is a unique and incredibly, really fascinating category in halacha. The Meiri explains it is the minhagim hanahugim ba'uma mitzat tznius. It is the minhagim, the behaviors, what is customary in the Yiddish nation of how B'nai Yisrael naturally dress and behave in a more tzniistic way. That's what Das Yehudis is. Now, for clarity's sake, usually we talk about D'Oraisa and D'Rabbanan. Okay, this is very important. D'Oraisa means it's derived from the Torah. D'Rabbanan it is created by the Rabbanan. It's not from the Torah. Not they figured out from Torah. They added to it, like the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles, like the Negavas, or like other mitzvahs that are mitzvahs D'Rabbanan. Everything that is derived from Torah's Dairaisa, even if it's a hinted to. But even the mitzvahs Rabbanan that are created by and added by the Chachamim, Shev mitzvahs Rabbanan and others, are still mandatory in Halacha. And actually, keeping the mitzvahs Rabbanan is mandatory in Halacha from Dairaisa, because there's a mitzvah in the Torah, l'chol asher yerucha, l'isasur, not to follow, to listen to the words of the Chachamim, whatever they're going to teach you, and not to stray from them. So, in a sense, keeping Darabanan is basically mandatory Dairaisa. Right? That's, for example, let's give one example on that. People, no one's going to say, I think, here at this group or any from a Yid is not going to say, oh, it's just, I want to eat a chocolate bar. It's an hour after chicken soup. I didn't eat the chicken in the soup, so it's just the broth. And anyway, it's not meat, it's chicken. Do you know how far removed that is from the original Dairaisa? Dairaisa is leisavashal gedi b'chalev ima. It's the meat with the milk. Very, very specific. And then from this becomes this, and Chacham made a chicken also, and this, and you have to wait, even if the chicken was in the broth and you only had the broth, and you have to wait 6 hours. Many levels removed. We're not giving anyone ideas here. It's mandatory halacha. It's not a nice minhag. It is 100% required halacha to wait 6 hours after the chicken broth, even though it is many levels removed from the Dairaisa. In practical halacha, it doesn't make a difference. It makes no difference if something is Dairaisa, Dirabanan, of malacha, tolda, shvus to shvus, whatever, etc. Once it's brought down halacha, it's mandatory, and to a certain extent, chamurim divrei seifrim, the words of the chachamim are in a sense more severe in certain areas. The one difference is b'di'evet, after the fact, when there's a problem, when someone by mistake dumped something that you got the wrong, something fell into somewhere in the kitchen, right, by mistake, and you call the Rav in a panic that I just trafe up my whole kitchen, and the Rav calms you down and asks you a question, and basically, if it's a suffix, and if you're not sure, there's some kind of suffix there, then when it comes to Dirabanan, it's easier for the Rav to rely on a heter. It's a specific mechanism in halacha that it's important for a Rav to know all the background of what is exactly what. It's not optional. Like I do Diraisa, I don't do Dirabanan, that's basically the Karaim, right? Right? I put tefillin over here, because I don't, etc. So we all know this is basic Yiddishkeit, that halacha is comprised of many different factors. Diraisa, Dirabanan don't matter in terms of whether I have to keep it or not. It's strictly, it applies to very specific b'di'evet situations. After the fact, as as far as finding a term, as far as suffix or whatever. Now, when it comes to Tznius, here's what's amazing. There's no Darabanan in Tznius. There's Dairaisa, what we call das Maisha. It's not das, like Chachmina das. It's das, like dasehem shainais, like dati, like religion, the religion of Maisha. That's Dairaisa. The Darabanan of Tznius is called das Yehudis. It is the one area in Yiddishkeit that Hashem trusts the women to define the halacha that is usually defined by the Rabbanim. This is something that I've always found fascinating, because it's like, often women complain and feel like Torah doesn't respect our opinion, and the halacha is defined by the Rabbanim, which are men, and why can't the women be trusted to be the Rav or to, be a Yoetzet or whatever. I'm not getting into controversies right now, but there's a lot of sentiment about this, like, why can't women define halacha? There is one huge area in halacha where women, and we'll talk about which women, but women, not men, are supposed to define the details in every generation of what that looks like, and that is tznius. And this, according to, as we're going to see right now, according to halacha, from the Mishnah, Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, this same concept that we're going to find from the Mishnah is brought down pretty much in all the future paiskim in halacha, is considered halachically binding. Okay, so the points I'm making, number one, before we go further, are das Maisha and das Yehudis are like Dairaisa Dirabanan. Das Yehudis is the equivalent of Dirabanan. It is established by women, specific women, not just anyone, whoever, whatever they think. We'll get to that. But they are all mandatory. It doesn't mean some things are, it's not hashkafa. It's not the look. It's not a nice idea. It's just different categories in where it comes from in halacha, but they are all binding. So what do we see about das Maisha and das Yehudis in the Torah? So I'm going to start with Das Maisha, what we know about the Halachos of Das Maisha. I imagine we might not have time to get past this. So for everyone who's asking questions about lots of other things, I may not get to some of them now, but Eretz Hashem next time. We hope to at least cover Das Maisha. The two Sukkim, again, this is, we don't learn Halacha from Sukkim, but Chachamim do, and they derive it from there. All the Halachos of Tznius derived in Das Maisha are generally derived throughout the Mishnah and Gemara from these two Sukkim. One pasuk tells us in Devarim, Ki Hashem Elokechem Misalchem Kerem Machanech, that Hashem is walking amongst you, lehatzilcha, to save you, and to send out your enemies. And Hashem is protecting you. But what is the criteria? What is the what do you have to do to merit that protection? V'haya machanecha kadosh, your machane, your camp needs to be holy. What does it mean that your camp is holy? That erva is not seen. So we see this concept of chacham derived from here. Many things, and we'll get to later on, devarim shebekdusha. But the basic concept that Hashem does not like erva, that Hashem cannot be with us, that Hashem is not comfortable with putting His presence amongst Bnei Yisrael when there is erva, when there is exposure. Hold that thought. Then we have one more pasuk on which the halacha is based on, and that is the story of the Isha Saita. It's a very painful story. It's a very sad story. I'm sure everyone knows the story. We're not going to discuss it. But fascinatingly enough, the Isha Saita has the schos, or the potential Isha Saita, right, that we learn many halachas from her. The story of the Isha Saita, the Kohen has to uncover her hair. The fact that he uncovers her hair, and that's considered a bizoyan, is where the Chachamim derive the halacha from, that hair of a married woman is supposed to be covered at all times, and that is d'oraisa. Some say faras roish ha'isha, that they could just say faras roisha, but it says ha'isha. The fact that it points out the woman means that he uncovers her head and also uncovers part of her body, and that implies also that her body is erva. Many explanations on that, but many of the halachas boil down to either of these two psukim. So that's briefing the original, where we start from Torah Shebachsav, which brings us to the Mishnah, and I want to focus specifically on this. This is the first place we see defined the Halachos of Tznius, Das Maisha, Das Yehudis, what's what, and then we'll break them down. The Mishnah says, and the Mishnah is talking about a woman who loses the rights to her ksuba, unfortunately. Again, it's a sad situation. The equivalent would be a man who is Pastor Shalom abusing his wife in some form, and he is responsible for the dissolution of the marriage, and he has to pay his ksuba. And following that, we talk about which woman, if a marriage ends, Chas v'Shalom, does not deserve the rights to her ksuba because it's her fault. And that's not to say we're comparing anything to abuse. We're just saying halacha practically this is where it comes. In other words, we're talking about when it's the man's fault, when it's the woman's fault. When is it her? When is she responsible for what happened to the marriage? When she is Iveris al Das Maisha v'Yehudis. Note, this is incredible. Note how the Mishnah puts it in one phrase together. If she's Iver and Das Maisha or Yehudis, it's the same thing. Like if she's Iver and Dairaisa or Das Yehudis, right? Like whichever one it is, it doesn't matter. Either one. If she transgresses Das Maisha or Yehudis, then she is not relied upon in a Yiddish marriage, and certain times her husband has a mitzvah to divorce, so we're not going to get to that, should, whatever, but if they divorce, then she doesn't get her ksuba. And then lists what is Das Maisha and what is Das Yehudis. I'm going to refer to some of Das Yehudis here because you need to learn the Das Maisha from the Das Yehudis, but I'm not really tackling that right now. What is Das Maisha? So it gives examples. She gives him food from which Meister wasn't taken. She misleads him about her nida status, and he's over on Isuri Karis, Chas v'Shalom, thinking she is tahar. She doesn't take challah. So in other words, she's giving him food that's not kosher, or misleading him at Taras Mishpacha, not giving Nadarim, etc. So very clearly, she is breaching basic halachas in Torah. She's not from. He can't stay married to a woman who he doesn't know at all times. He can rely on Torah status, on kashrus of her food. There's no way he can keep Torah mitzvahs that way, right? There is a trust that has been broken. Then it moves on to Das Yehudis. Again, I'm only talking right now about this in the context of what we learn about it from the Das Maisha. I'm going to go back to it afterwards. The Das Yehudis, what does it mean she's over in Das Yehudis? One example is Yoitza V'Reisha Perua. She goes out and her hair is uncovered. Now, this is very interesting because we just said that hair coverings deraisa, and all of the Mefarshim jump on the Gemara jumps on this. You look in the Gemara on this Mishnah and says, hold on a second, isn't hair covering deraisa? How are you saying that going out with her hair uncovered is das Yehudis? And the Gemara there answers based on all the Mefarshim, and it's brought down all the further halacha as well, that we're talking about going out without a complete hair covering, because deraisa, the level of hair covering mandated deraisa, just like we said with the meat and the milk and the chicken and the milk, the level of deraisa hair covering is a basic something, some cloth on her head, something on her head, similar to men, not maybe more than the men, but just like by the men, by the way, that the Halachos of Tznius apply to men, and one of the Halachos of Tznius for men is to have hair covering. People don't know that the Halachic, one of the basic Halachic reasons for a yarmulke is Tznius. The hair is considered, the head is supposed to be covered, it's not supposed to be bare. But anyway, so she has some sort of hair covering, that's deraisa, some sort of cloth, but not covering all the hair, that's deraisa. Das Yehudis, the accepted standard amongst Yiddish women has always been that Yiddish women cover all their hair. And you see in the story of of Oin Ben Peles, who was supposed to join, think about Oin Ben Peles, for, his whole group of friends, the 250 cronies of Kairach. They weren't the biggest tzaddikim, they were very maybe talented people, smart people. They were out to wage war, revolution against Maisha Rabbeinu, right? So we're not talking about the holiest of the holy at the moment. They're going to wage war against Maisha Rabbeinu. Think what happens. They come to Ein Ben Peles' house to pick him up. They see a woman sitting in front of the house, and her hair is completely uncovered and opened. The cloth isn't on it, and it's totally like undone and open and out. And they run for their lives as if they just saw a woman completely uncovered. In other words, the norm was Yiddish women, this is way before Mishnah, Yiddish women, they cover their hair, and letting her hair out was just, it's always been said to be erba. Yiddish women always cover their hair fully and properly, and the level of das Yehudis covering is complete hair covering. So we're talking about here, even if she had some sort of cloth, says the Gemara, but she went out without completely covering, some of her hair was uncovered, so she's not satisfying the das Yehudis requirements. That would be this case. So again, we're finding here the das Yehudis, but the das Maisha is, according to das Maisha, a woman has to cover her hair, deraisa, basic hair covering. Same thing happens with Taiva Bashuk. She weaves in the marketplace. Why is weaving in the marketplace a problem? So the Mefarshim and the Gemara bring two different reasons. One is because when she weaves, the motion of weaving, she's weaving like she's sitting there and she's weaving towards the center of her body, the place of error, but she's calling attention to a private part of her body just in the motion of the weaving. So she's calling attention to herself, or because her sleeves ride up, meaning maybe she went out with a sleeve that was sufficient, but now that she's sitting there and weaving, her sleeves are coming up and you see her elbows. And again, it's pointed out there by Mefarshim as well, that this is the level of das Yehudis, is that she wore clothing that was able to come to be uncovered. She wasn't covered enough to ensure that she would stay covered, or she was doing an activity that called too much attention to her body. But the basic level there, they point out that the elbow should be covered, the arm should be covered lechatchila, the body should be covered lechatchila. All that is das Maisha. The rest I'm going to go back to when we get to das Yehudis. I want to just point that out and bring this from the Gemara on the next slide here. So the Gemara talks about Reisha Pro Deraisahi on this. This is the Gemara on this Mishnah. There's Reisha Deraisahi that going out with a hair without a head covering is Deraisa. As her of Yisrael, that they shouldn't go Preyas Reish. Maris Reiseha, and it goes into what we just said. That's the source for that if you wanted to see it. So now, practically in Das Maisha, you have as follows. The halachos of Das Maisha are the halachos of technical erva. Again, I want to make sure that there isn't misunderstanding. None of this should be interpreted as this is halacha, the rest is optional. The rest is not optional, and the rest is not like a nice concept. The rest is just another category in halacha. But we're talking right now about only the das Maisha category. What is considered technically erva, exposure, dairaisa? You find this brought in the halachas of Hilchos Kriyashma. This is the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch here. And he says, Tefach megula be'isha b'mokom shedarka lachasais ervahu. the concept of tefach is only related to Kriya Shema. We will talk about that in number 5 in Mirz Hashem. So what's relevant here is the Alter Rebbe is referring to the concept that there is mokem shedarka l'chasais, and that is erva. That parts of a woman's body that are supposed to be covered are erva. She is not, popular misconception here, she's not allowed to uncover a tefach. It's not like, oh, like here there could be a tefach open, there could be a tefach open, that's okay. That's not what it means here. It just means that once a man sees a tefach, as we'll discuss, then he can't say Kriya Shema, etc. So nothing to do with our topic right now, the tefach. When a mokem shtar kalachasis, there are places that are in a woman's body, a man's body also, we're not talking about men right now, that should be covered. And when they are uncovered, that's erva. That is defined as erva. What is not erva? And this gives us a very, very clear understanding of what is the das Maisha on erva. You look further, the next thing that's underlined, aval paneha v'yadeha shedarkan lias megulim mutter. What is not erva? In other words, a woman's body is erva. Why is it erva? Because bichlal, let's take a step back for a moment, bichlal, a Yiddish body is kaddish. The body houses neshama, chelik elokam mimah mamish, Hashem in this world. And the potential for koyach ein soif, the potential for everything that comes from housing a neshama is explosive. And so after Chet Tzadas, Adam and Chava recognized that the incredible godly potential that they have could be misused. And therefore we protect it to ensure that the koyach that rests within our bodies is only channeled towards where it should be channeled in the right direction, not misused, which we will talk about a little further because I want to finish this. So the body, again, that's not to say it's chas shalom, it's bad. In other words, erva means it's holy, it's powerful, it has to be protected. What is not sensitive that has to be protected in that kind of way? Paneha v'yadeha, that's the exception. The entire body of a yid, and specifically a woman who is contains the potential to create new life, mamish koyach ein soif, it's kedusha, tremendous kedusha, and therefore it's erva, and kedusha and erva don't go together. So we cover it, we protect it, we ensure that it is treated with the respect it deserves. The exception is paneha v'yadeha. The only exceptions. There are many popular misconceptions out there that many things aren't erva, that the leg isn't erva, that the foot isn't erva, that you can go barefoot, that you can do this, that you can do that. It's very clear in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that that's not true. All of a woman's body is considered erva besides 2 things, paneha, her face, v'yadeha, and her hands. And the only question is, where does paneha end? Where does yadeha end? Right? Meaning we start the opposite way. I remember seeing a picture somewhere, I can't remember where, some sort of joke of like tape put on elbows and knees and a neckline, as if like it's the collarbone we have a problem with and the knee, like we just don't like seeing knees, so like stick a piece of tape on the knee or something. Like that's a complete misconception. It's simply a border till here. And in fact, the border goes the opposite way. It's not you have to cover your elbows, you have to cover your knees, you have to cover your collarbone. The woman's body is kaddish, and therefore it's considered erva. What is not erva and can be exposed without concern of its kedusha being misdirected is paneha v'yadeha. Paneha ends at a certain point. Where does the face end? So there are some opinions that say the neck has to be covered as well, but that is not the mainstream opinion, so we don't go by that. Consider the face and the neck, but the neck ends somewhere, right? So according to Paiskim, consensus of the Paiskim, the neck ends as soon as it begins to slope. So everyone knows about collarbone in the front. That's an easy place to find. Once it's the collarbone, it's the chest. That's no longer the neck. But people often don't realize it's easy to kind of forget that the neck is round. There are other boundaries as well. So the best suggestion I found in Halacha, this is brought by many Paiskim, I saw it from Rabbi Gluchevsky in Eretz Yisrael, many others, is to do the necklace test. I know when you do it first, you're like a little bit shocked that it's that high. Like I said, go back to the story about Rabbi Levin. Every Yiddish woman is a tzniistika woman. I'm a tzniistika woman. I'm working on it. I'm a tzniistika woman. I'm struggling with finding the right neckline. It is not all or nothing. Okay, I want to say that really, really clearly. It is so not all or nothing. I'm a human being too. We all work in it. We all have our struggles. We try. it's not like, people say like, oh, I broke Shabbos, I'm done. My Shabbos is over. I broke my fast type of thing. Chas v'shalom, there's no such concept in Yiddishkeit. I broke my Shabbos. Someone did something by mistake that was Mechalel Shabbos. What Hashem wants from you in the next moment is tshuva. Try your best to keep Shabbos in the next moment. One has no bearing on the other. The fact that I'm struggling here or struggling there, the fact that my neckline is, that I'm struggling to get it to, I put on the necklace and I see where it slopes on the sides and in the back, right? Where it falls in the back and where it falls on the sides indicates that it's starting to slope. If it were, right? Because if it were a cylinder like this, it would just keep going. So once it slopes, it's the shoulders. It's not the neck anymore. Right? You put on the necklace test and that's the boundary of the sides and the back of the neck. Again, if that feels severe, everything counts, right? A little more counts. Every extra bit that I close it, that I make sure that it's closer and closer counts. I appreciate every bit of it and it grows on me. So in short, I want to wrap up with that and then I'm going to take questions again, only on Das Maisha because we're running out of time. There's a lot more to talk about in terms of Das Yehudis. The Das Maisha practically is that, as we said, that a Yid needs to see part of Tznius, part of a lifestyle of Tznius, which is a broader thing as we discussed. It's for men and women. It is always, it's a behavior, it's the way we speak, it's a matter of being dignified, but one of the very key parts of that is a basic building block of Tznius is protecting the kedusha of a woman's body and a man as well. Men have halachos of Tznius. I'm just not enumerating them. A man can also do whatever, show his legs, etc. Shorts, right? Can't wear shorts. Has to have part of the arm exposed. I'm covered, but I'm just not talking about men. I'm talking about women. So a woman's body is an extra level of kedusha. It's housing a neshama, but it's housing not only a neshama, but the potential to bring life into the world, and that needs to be protected. That's a key part of Tznius, and Torah gives us very, very, very clear guidelines about that. And like everything in Yiddishkeit, the basis is the Yira Shamayim, as we discussed. The basis is the Kabbalah's oil of, first, this is the Halacha, Nasa, Vinishma, the appreciation, the feelings for Tznius are all so important, and they build and they come with keeping the basic criteria, which are, again, ensuring that the woman's body is covered at all times, except for, but I want to point out one more thing here that is really, really critical, and that is the last part in the Shulchan Aruch. Shoika, what about the shoik? Meaning, that should be simple enough, right? A woman's body needs to be covered, only paneha v'yadeha. I'm sorry, I didn't do yadeha. Paneha ends here, it ends at the end of the neck. We defined the parameters of that, and the arm, according to most opinions, ends at the elbow. So that's where we get from that it has to be covered till after the elbow. Some opinions say till the wrist, but that's not the mainstream opinion that we follow. Now, there is a misconception about shoik, so I want to clear that up, and we'll, I guess, conclude with that. The shoik, says the Alter Rebbe, is more severe than anything else. The context is that, as we'll discuss about and then in Kriya Shema, that if they see a tefach revealed of anything else, they can't say Kriya Shema. When it comes to the shoik, even less than a tefach is a problem. It's considered most severe. The question is, what's the shoik? Some opinions, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's some, it's one. There is an opinion from the Mishnah Berurah. It is a minority opinion. Everyone else says differently, but there is a minority opinion that that holds that shoik is the thigh, meaning from the waist until after the knee. Everyone agrees that from the waist till after the knee is for sure considered shoik and must be covered with a complete covering. That means camouflage, not with pants, right? Complete covering, because it is super sensitive. It is closest to a woman's private area, and therefore most sensitive to be careful with the tznius. It has to be covered with the skirt completely until after the, that is everyone's opinion, even the minority opinion. But the minority opinion, Mishnah Berurah, is that that's considered the shoik until after the knee. The Alter Rebbe and all other poskim, and the poskim after the Alter Rebbe actually all go by the Alter Rebbe, is that the shoik includes all the way down. It's the calf. And you see that here in the Shulchan Aruch, that the Alter Rebbe defines the shoik as einay mokem tzenua be'ish. It is not a part of the body that is considered sensitive and tzniistic in a man. It's normal for a man to uncover. Of course, it's not normal and accepted for men to go around with their thighs uncovered. And employees means socks, in places that they go around without socks. So it's clear from the Alter Rebbe, he's saying that it's normal in places without socks, the men go around with their calves uncovered, not their thighs. But for women, it's more sensitive. So the Alter Rebbe holds, and again, this is not my interpretation, this is many Paiskim afterwards, and I'll refer you to some sources in a moment, that the conclusion is majority opinion that shoik includes the entire length of the leg. And of course, the feet have to be covered as well as tefach megula b'isha erva. No exception was made for the feet either. But that the shoik is the most severe part of a woman's body. Now, the practical application of this das Maisha is as follows. Everyone agrees that midairaisa, a woman has to have her body covered, and that includes her legs. It's not a chumrah. It's not an extra nice idea. It's definitely not a minhag. Whether it's das Maisha or das Yehudis, the minority opinion of the Mishnah Brura is basically saying that the shoik is until after the knee, and from the knee down, according to the opinion of the Mishnah Brura, has to be covered with some sort of covering as per das Yehudis. So even according to the minority opinion, the legs have to be covered, but they can be covered with something basic. According to the Alter Rebbe's opinion, it has to be completely, opaquely, properly, fully covered. Now, I know this raises lots of questions, because then it's like, okay, so then what about sheer stockings? Sheer stockings is a super complicated topic. Suffice it to say this. Practically in halacha, today, given the situation that it has become common in from communities that women wear sheer stockings, b'di'evet, it is relied upon by Rabbanim that there is a minority opinion that says that's sufficient. Again, something, not nothing, because nothing is not sufficient according to anyone. But since the minority opinion holds that the legs only have to be covered with a basic covering, like some sort of something that camouflages the legs somewhat, since there is such a minority opinion, then it can be relied upon after the fact, and it's acceptable halachically. It may not be the ideal level, but it is considered acceptable. But at least that is 100% required. It is important to note that the Alter Rebbe's opinion is that it should be more than that, and that we should aspire to really try to follow the Alter Rebbe's opinion on the matter, that it shouldn't be sheer, it should be more properly opaque. And of course, every level in that, as the takanon that is brought from this, if you've seen this, this is a takanon of Tznius. What's it called? What's the word takanon? Guidelines of Tznius that were made in Eretz Yisrael. And I'm going to discuss that more next time in the context of das Yehudis, because there's a lot more to talk about the das Yehudis part of it. But according to that, as per the Rabbanei Chabad in Eretz Yisrael, they defined it as a woman should wear stockings that are at minimum 20 denier, that's at least the minority opinion, that it needs a basic covering, that at least it should be that, at least it should be that the leg is somewhat camouflaged, but Tavele Bracha, that it is encouraged that we try to move more towards the Alter Rebbe's opinion of a higher level denier, of more complete covering. So I think that covers what there is to cover about das Maisha. And of course, there is hair is part of that as well. Hair covering, a woman's body being covered completely besides her face and hands. All of that is mitam das Maisha, and das Maisha refers to practical erva. What we leave to discuss next time in das Yehudis, and then the other categories in Mirz Hashem, das Yehudis refers to everything else. All the other fine details that only a woman can define, and that also evolve with new generations, new fashions, new things come up. You know, they didn't have slits before, they didn't have short skirts, they didn't have whatever. So like all the fine details, nail polish, whatever, we'll discuss all those things. Those fall under das Yehudis. What is or isn't mandatory, or what the das Yehudis is, all that in Mirz Hashem to be discussed. Das Maisha simply refers to the actual covering of skin and the covering of hair by a woman. Before I take questions, I know we're running out of time, I want to just leave off with this thought. Rabbi Gafni shares that he came to Yehudis by the Rebbe from Eretz Yisrael with a whole list of important things to talk about. And his wife asked him, please, she was involved with Rabbi Landau making some sort of event for Tznius and Bnei Brak. Please mention to the Rebbe about this event. So he felt like I have a lot of important things to discuss, but like, okay, I'll do my wife a favor. I'll throw that in as well. He sent into the Rebbe all his important, we have this and that and the other, all his important matters. And then he put out at the end something about his wife and the Tznius class. He says the Rebbe answered briefly, a short thought about this, a short thought about that, whatever he mentioned to the Rebbe, all his important things, a very quick point. And then the Rebbe started going on and on and on at length about this thing that he didn't want to talk about, that his wife mentioned about the Tznius shiurim she was giving, and gave the bulk of the Yehudis to how important it is what she's doing, and that better it should be done by the women. And we appreciate what the Rabbanim are doing, but it has to be done woman to woman ideally, and she should do it more. And how much pain the Rebbe was in that women were taking their cue from the Goy in Paris and not from the Shulchan Aruch, etc., and how much the Rebbe was encouraging and giving brachas, so important in practically in encouraging women in Tznius. So in the spirit of what, the story from Rabbi Levin before, again, that doesn't mean it's like, I'm not, oh no, now I found out that I'm doing this wrong and that wrong and the other, and I can't possibly do this, so forget it, chas v'shalom. Getting in touch with our core as Yidden. It is natural for a Yid to have Baishanis. It is natural for a woman to be Tzniistic. It's in us, and it is who we are. We are Tzniistic, the women, and Torah is there to help us get in touch with our real selves. And if I can take one little step towards getting a little bit closer to the guidelines that Torah gives us, then I will acquire more sensitivity, and I'll be, have more kayach to go into another step. And all this is just in the positive vaseita, if not in what am I doing wrong. Look at what little step can I improve on a little bit more. Having said that, I want to turn to Hasi. Any last questions? I know we're past our official time, so anyone who wants to stay on for the questions, you're more than welcome. I hope you gain from them. Hasi.
Right. Yeah, so now we're going to go into the question segment. We have a few questions, and if you feel some of them will be addressed next week, you'll let me know. Can you elaborate more about the foot being covered? If the Alter Rebbe says the leg goes down to the ankle, can you then wear leggings without socks?
Okay, excellent question. So again, the foot has to be covered, not mitzad shoik, mitzad just tefach megula b'isha erva, meaning the foot is like every other part of a woman's body, like the upper arm or the chest, which weren't defined specifically. The rule was a woman's body has to be covered except face and hands. Then the Alter Rebbe pointed out that the shoik is even more severe in that if a man sees even less than a tefach, then he can't say Kriya Shema. So we're simply defining shoik, even if we define shoik as till the ankle, that just means that's the part of the body that is selected to be most severe than anything else. But the foot is no different than, here and everything else that has to be covered as regular.
Okay, so that leads us into a few more things that relate to that. And that, is there any difference in the covering of the bottom of the leg then, if you're at home or out?
Okay, so I want to answer that from Shaitel, first of all, which might help us understand something. I'm not getting into Kisur Reish, but we all know how much the Rebbe begged that the appropriate hair covering should be a Shaitel outside the home. Why? Because it's impossible to actually keep it. Like practically, it's not going to happen that the hair will remain fully covered if one's wearing a tichel. A lot of tznius is recognizing what is liable to happen. Within a home, first of all, there are other people. Even one's own family members, brothers, whoever, who are not allowed to see her erva. Even her own husband, even when he's allowed to, even if at a particular time he's allowed to see erva, can't say any davar shebekdusha around her. Anyone else can walk into the home, any guest, you can open the front door, etc., etc. Her own sons shouldn't see it. So practically, walking around a home, the chances that no one's going to see her really aren't very great. And then we move to the concept of tznius, as we discussed in number 1, that really primarily tznius is not for anybody else, meaning it's more severe if a man sees it, of course. But the most essential part of tznius is it's Shavis Hashem L'negdi Samid, and Hashem is always around. Note what we said in Shulchan Aruch in the beginning, that one shouldn't dress or undress in one's own bedroom, even with no one there, except if we're under the covers. So if we should only be undressing under our covers in the privacy of our bedrooms, then certainly our body should be covered at all times. And in that sense, no, the leg is no different in one's own home. I do know there are some misconceptions about that, and there are misconceptions. I saw an interesting letter from the Rebbe, which is a little bit painful. It's brought in beautiful within, where the Rebbe mentions that, like, we're not going to get into the reasons why there has been a challenge with Tznius and Lubavitch, literally like in those words. I mean, yes, we've had a challenge, and it's important to acknowledge that. It's been a weak link for many generations due to oppression, xeris, lack of education of women, etc., in Russia and back. And we're not taking away from the Mesiras Nefesh and the Yerushalayim of those women, but it's been a challenge. So we're still working up from that challenge, and a lot of misconceptions sort of stem from that. Hope that answers that.
Thank you. If according to the Alter Rebbe, the legs have to be covered all the way, then why do we also have the flip side that long skirts are not considered tznius?
Okay. Great. So long skirts specifically, we don't mean like long-ish, like ideally, it's nice to wear a skirt longer. Ooh, and I'm sorry, I forgot something totally important to bring. I guess we'll have to pull that up here. What the Rebbe says about length of skirts, I missed that source. Very, very important. The Rebbe defines the length of skirts, let me see if I can get that up briefly here, as the Midah Shava L'chol Nefesh, meaning the Rebbe says that it's not necessary to wear skirts till the floor, but that they at least need to be, let's see where that is, here. Okay, here we go. Oops, did I lose that? Here, the Midah Shava L'chol Nefesh, the Rebbe defines the length of skirts that is necessary to wear as Midah Shava L'chol Nefesh, for everyone. The halacha, this is Das Maisha, B'chol Makom, is that the knees should be covered even when sitting. And this, as the Rebbe, is the minimum, the absolute minimum. In some places, it's not enough. There are different standards of tznius in different places, and that is only lehachmir. Not you can go down, but there are some communities who require even longer than that, and that one must keep that higher level. And even the Rebbe says later that it's possible that min ha-Torah, it is usher to do differently than the higher level in a community. But the Rebbe is saying the basic level of skirts is that they have to be long enough to cover the skirts always in all positions. So the Rebbe is clearly not, even though, following the Alter Rebbe, it's enough that the upper part is camouflaged. The lower part is allowed to be apparently like the upper arm. We don't know why. You're allowed to show the form of it. It is a good question why. We don't really know the answer to that. I remember you asked something else. So no, so what's the issue with long skirts? Meaning it definitely doesn't have to be long in that way, but the issue with long is specifically something that came out, and you find this, the Rebbe spoke about it. At a particular time, they came out with a fashion of extra long skirts, meaning skirts that were like sweeping the floor, narrow, sort of clingy, and draping to the floor, dragging the floor. And the Rebbe commented with pain really about this new fashion, like many other fashions that were intended to, which really brings us into Das Yehudis. It's not a matter of erva, but it's a matter of the look that is pritzistic, the look that is not tzniistic, and how inappropriate that is. And apparently from when that came out, there became a sensitivity to be extra careful now that there's such a thing of these like long drapey skirts, to be careful not to wear one of those. So it's that specific issue.
Okay, so I guess the next question may actually be connected to this. You could address it. What about fishnet tights? Okay,
so according to basically all the paiskim, fishnet tights don't really count as tights. They're basically clearly exposing the leg at various points, and they're different than like a 20 denier, basic sheer stockings, where at least on a minimal level, you're not really seeing the leg completely. It's covered. So yeah, fishnet is not considered acceptable by paiskim.
Okay, another question is, I remember seeing something about a foot being okay to be exposed in places near the equator, and the questioner quotes Rabbi Wiener Sefer. So you had mentioned before that the foot is not included. Is there an opinion?
Right. Yes. So there is something brought in Halacha that in remote places is the lashon, and I encourage everyone, and I'm going to mention this next time as well, to look up the following sources. I think it's like something that every Lubavitcher should go through. These two Sfarim. One is Kvuda Bas Melech, what you just quoted, Rabbi Wiener's Sefer. An incredible Sefer. If you look at the Hebrew part, that's the majority of it, you will probably get dizzy. It is for every single thing. There are like dozens and dozens of references, and it's incredible how many poskim deal with every fine detail of this. But you don't have to go there. Look at the English section. On the left, it opens with an English. It's very simple, very easy to understand. And this Sefer was encouraged by the Rebbe. The Rebbe pushed for it to be printed. It was approved by all the Lubavitcher Rabbanim, including the Rabbanim of Crown Heights at the time, Rabbi Dvorkin, Rabbi Marlow, everyone else, including the current members of the Beis and Shechiu, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, this is the Halachos, and you can look that up clearly. What it says there, what he says is that in remote places, and the other thing I would just, while I'm here, Bas Melech Pnima, the Rebbe's sources on Tznius, and Beautiful Within, and some others. But if you look up that Sefer, it's very clear that in remote places where nobody wears socks, even if they go to like greet the king, meaning there's no such concept, not like everyone doesn't wear socks, like it's Florida, no one wears socks. That's not what we're talking about. It's the kind of locales where even the most dignified people don't wear socks, because that's not a thing. It's like hot in the desert and everyone wears sandals and even fancy robes, but sandals. We're talking about the olden ages. I don't know if that even applies to anywhere today. So that's the specific exception, that it's not even a thing. In any kind of Western normal territory, where dignified people wear socks and shoes, it's not a relevant concept.
Okay. Another question is, are other girls allowed to see a married woman's hair? I guess, or any other part of erva?
Okay, so again, back to number one. The concept of erva is really for Hashem, not anybody else. It's just more complicated when there are other people. And I didn't even really get to that, get to the Bible, men seeing it. It's not about other people. It's about my Yira Shamayim, my sensitivity to Hashem's presence, and Hashem doesn't rest in a place of erva. So mitzad halacha of Shavis Hashem Negdi Saman, getting dressed under the covers, chayav adam, a person has to be tzniustic in all their ways. Mitzad that halacha, it makes no difference if anyone's around. As far as das Maisha, das Yehudis, obviously that takes into account that the whole thing is more problematic if there are men around. So it's definitely more serious if there are men, and that's maybe the biggest practical problem in halacha, but one should be careful. It's not like, oh, it's no big deal with girls around as well, even if there's no one around. So yes, it's less problematic, but it's still not tzniustic, still not appropriate.
Is there any difference between the hair or other parts of erva when we talk about that in front of other women?
Well, interestingly enough, hair is the one thing that, according to all opinions, is deraisa. So one could say that the hair of a married woman is the most problematic of everything, or the hair and the shaik are considered equal. So maybe the most serious parts of a woman's body that all agree at deraisa and need to be covered and should be really careful, apparently, are the hair and the shaik. So obviously that does not mean you cannot go get a haircut, married woman, and you're having a woman cut your hair. So whatever the case might be. But that's, like everything else, what we need to uncover when we need to uncover it. Not just, why not? I'm with girls in camp, I can walk around with shorts or whatever the case might be. Yes, you're allowed to go swimming. I'm saying that's like any other need. You're allowed to.
What about erva?
Right, okay, so really we go back to number one, which is the halacha of getting dressed under the covers. And then it says, what's the exception? In the bathroom or the bathhouse. And in the bathhouse, one should get dressed as soon as possible. So in other words, the concept of tznius is one should be covered as much as possible as they can. When it comes to men, there's nothing to discuss. That's a separate issue. Men, we're getting to that, right? There's no leeway there. They're not allowed to see erva, period. So that's a problem. As far as myself and my own tznius, I am allowed to uncover what I need to uncover when I need to uncover it to the extent that I need to. That includes in the restroom. It's like if someone takes a shower, so they shouldn't just sit around and do their makeup without getting dressed, for example. Like, get dressed, then do your makeup, right? Like even in the restroom, one should be tzniustic. In the pool, if I can wear something that is safe and comfortable to swim with, and it's more tzniustic, then I should, there's no reason to be, and it's not considered tzniustic to uncover any more than one has to. Of course, you can't swim in a skirt. That's dangerous. But should one wear, a half bathing suit? Like, no, that there's no reason to be exposed like that. So it's really about being mindful to be as appropriate as possible. I'm finished swimming. I'm sitting on, on the side of the pool. So now put on the cover up, right? Like not just sit there exposed.
What about the length of a shaitel? Is that part of today, or are we addressing that?
Next time in Mitzvah Hashem, all the other fun topics.
Okay, and I've got a couple people that would love to see that takanon that you posed. So if you'd be able to send that as something that I can post additionally as a handout.
Sure. So I'm going to share it for next time simply because I don't want that to be reviewed before we talk about Das Yehudis, because like a lot of understanding of Das Yehudis and where lots of these things come from is necessary to really appreciate how we got to all those rules. I mean, the takanon is a combination of Das Maisha and Das Yehudis, and I'd be happy to share it after next class, if that's okay.
Okay, that is all the rest of the questions. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And we will be continuing next week with part 2 of the power of modesty, where Chanie will continue going on into Das Yehudis and the continued halachos. If you came a little late or in the middle, or you have a friend who wants to see tonight's lecture, Be'ezus Hashem, by tomorrow, it will be up at mikvah.org/media, where you can catch up on part 1, and we will see you next week at 8:30, Be'ezus Hashem, mikvah.org/Zoom for part 2. Thank you so much, Chanie Wolf, for sharing all these important halachos with us tonight.
It's
Thank you.
next week, Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Thank you, Mrs. Maraza. Yes, next week, Wednesday night is Tisha B'Av. So please note the change of day. Tuesday, we have weekly Zooms. We've been having it for months on Wednesday, but next week it is Tuesday. Tuesday at 8:30, Be'ezus Hashem. Thank you very much, and we will see you Tuesday.
Thank you very much, and wishing everyone that these 9 days should be Hafku Yam Meidel L'Sas and L'Simcha, and by the time we get to next year, we should already be in Yerushalayim with Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Amen. Amen. Good night, everyone.